Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us live today. My name is Kusum Tsinobrego, and I will be your organizer for this webinar. Today we will be discussing the topic on how to determine a proper scope selection based on ISO 27001. Our presenter for today is Mr. David Anders, who has worked more than 20 years in the risk management field while managing a broad spectrum of consulting services and product solutions. Mr. David has worked in the consulting field for 16 years and is the CEO of SecuraStar, a niche ISO 27001 consulting firm in the United States and founder of ISMS Manager Software. Please be informed that you will have the opportunity to submit written questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the question pane of the control panel. I hope you will have the chance to learn new valuable things in today's session. Please, Mr. David, you may start with your presentation.
Hi, thank you to PECB for having me today, and I hope to provide some knowledge to worldwide for what to consider when considering the scope of the ISMS. As was mentioned, my name is David Anders. This is what I look like. I am the CEO, president of actually 3 companies: SecuraStar, which is a niche ISO 27001 consulting firm; iCertWorks, which is a specific PECB training and certification. This is the one that you'll see. SecuraStar and iCertWorks is the one we're moving into worldwide. We're going to have ISO 27001, ISO 22301, ISO 20000, ISO 9000 for starters, and that will be in North America and worldwide. So you'll see either SecuraStar or iCertWorks as we kind of transition to iCertWorks, and we will also be offering certifications in those standards. And then you'll also see ISOmanager.com. That is our international software. Is available internationally, and it's also ISO 27000 related here. So here's some contact information for us, and let's get started here. I wanted to cover one thing here, that this is an intellectual property statement, is that the things that we cover here in the presentation are owned by SecuraStar, iCertWorks, or ISO Manager, or all 3. You should not attempt to copy, reproduce, disassemble these things. We do own the intellectual property rights for these. And it just says here that by continuing to watch this presentation, you agree both personally and for your organization not to violate our intellectual property rights. Okay, a couple things here. We're just going to get started. What are the generic requirements for ISO 27001? Please keep in mind, for all those people that are new to ISO 27001, these are generic requirements, and so we're just going to show you how SecuraStar thinks about the world when we produce scopes for our clients, and why we do it the way that we do it, and it should give all of you some great ideas of what's important in your scope. We'll cover these just one by one here. Clause 4, context of the organization. There's actually 4 sub-clauses here. One is understanding the organization and its context. 4.2 is understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. Sub-clause 4.3 is determining the scope of the information security management system. And 4.4 is the information security management system itself. If you look here, you'll notice that these things are far more robust than the original ISO 27005 standard. And these are actually in chronological order, and I believe that these are done in order to make sure that you contemplate the organization and its context, that you realize who the interested parties are before you just go and decide what the scope is, okay? So we're just going to follow these in a step-by-step chronological order, and hopefully they'll help us determine a better scope that we've really thought out and makes sense for the organization. Okay, generic requirements. Then how do you implement ISO 27001? Well, let's start by establishing a step-by-step process flow in a framework, and this is what we typically go through with our clients so that they can kind of understand what's happening in ISO 27001. This framework here, we don't own these requirements, but we own how we put together this framework, okay, the process flow. And so you'll see right up here, starting in chronological order here, this says Clause 4, context of the organization. And there are typically two main outputs of this requirement here, and one is going to be a documented scope. That's actually the only thing that's required to be documented in Clause 4, and the legal, regulatory, contractual requirements that we need to monitor and measure. And if you look right down here, it's included in the monitor and measure here, legal, regulatory, contractual within the scope. Okay, so this is what we're going to be working on today, and you'll see here that these have a direct effect on the Clause 6 planning as they populate the asset inventory. Only the assets within the scope and only the legal, regulatory within the scope are covered in the risk assessment and are monitored and measurable down here in Clause 9, performance evaluation. Okay, so we're not going to go through all of this today, but I just wanted to show you that these are all related here in a continuous improvement process, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10 here, and then it just keeps going around and around in a continuous improvement process. Okay, all right, context of the organization here, these are the two main, the two basic outputs of context of the organization. Before we arrive at those two outputs, we can document a step-by-step chronological process to show that we considered everything and came up with the right scope for our organization. Okay, so let's look at some of the things here that we're going to consider. Internal, external issues, needs and expectations of interested parties, the scope of the ISMS, and legal, regulatory, contractual requirements. Before building an ISMS, we must first determine the context of the organization and how it might affect the scope, aka, or also known as, the information we're trying to protect. Okay, how and why the business operates, business requirements, products and services, interested parties, interfaces and dependencies, and legal, regulatory, contractual requirements. This context may also include internal policies, objectives, governance, cultures, and externally factors that are relevant to information security, such as geographical, political, legal requirements, depending on whatever country you're in, financial requirements, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things to consider here, and they vary from country to country, business to business. Okay, what we like to do now, as I mentioned to you earlier, there is only one documentation requirement in Clause 4, and that is the scope. However, we like to put everything down in this particular area, okay? I wouldn't recommend that for every clause. However, in this context of the organization, we want to show that we made a logical decision. So for us, for our clients, we actually put down here all of the interested parties, okay, into a document. And then we just list them one at a time, who the interested parties are. I'm just showing you one category here, and we start with executive management, right? Okay, so we're just going to go through here the information security requirements that executive management might have. One of them is going to be the intellectual property of the company. That may be a legal, regulatory, or contractual. This is a legal requirement to protect this intellectual property, just like I mentioned in that second slide, right? This is our intellectual property. And whether this is going to be in or out, okay? Trade secrets, legal, in or out. Patents or patents pending, legal, in or out. And this might be different for every company. It just depends on what executive management is interested in. You can also see here copyrighted information, legal, in or out. And then we're going to get to something here which I've highlighted on purpose because a lot of times the scope has to do with your product or professional liability. That is, what do your clients find as interested? And you might also see information in products or professional liabilities when you get to the client interested parties. They may say the information found in products and the information found in professional services that you're providing your client. But in this case, we're talking about product liability, professional liability, because executive management owns that liability, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And I'm going to say these two are in this case, okay, for the part of this presentation, okay? These are different for every company, so what's in and out is what you determine. Here is also, we're also going to consider here in the scope compliance requirements. Okay, so let's just say that our company has a SOC 1 SSAE 16 requirement. Now these are going to be United States requirements, okay, and we have a lot of regulations here or contractual requirements, so this is going to be different for a lot of companies around the world. But for us, SOC 1 SSAE 16 requirement is very common. HIPAA high-tech, this is a healthcare requirement. FISMA is for information security requirements for anybody that works with the government of the United States. PCI DSS, this is fairly common internationally. This is payment card industry requirements. And then we're talking about any contracts that we might have. The Microsoft contract, I'm just listing that as a possibility. And this may have some information security requirements if you're working as a service provider or a product provider to Microsoft. Okay, and you can see here we've just again listed whether it's contractual or whether it's legal regulatory, okay, and whether it's going to be in scope or out of scope. Just because it's a requirement of ours doesn't necessarily mean that it's in scope. We might have multiple products and services, and we only might have in scope a couple of those, even though we have these other requirements throughout our company. Okay, and a lot of this is going to be determined by your size of your company. So if you're a smaller company, everything might be in, but if you're a larger company, maybe only a few of the things will be in the scope that you want to certify, because you have a large company of multiple subsidiaries worldwide and those types of things, so not everything would be in scope. Okay. Also, we're also going to consider interfaces and dependencies that we rely on for our products and services. So you'll see here that we have internal providers, things like human resources, business operations, IT, okay, and then we'll see here who's the responsible party within those, the IT manager, the HR manager, the chief operations officer, and then interfaces and dependencies, the hiring of all employees, background checks internally within those, within the scope, okay. The service contract negotiations for service providers, this is very important because we have to manage service providers. IT has network security, access control, computer hardware and software, those types of things that are also interact typically with the average scope. Okay. We also have external providers that we can list, and again, these can be in different areas here. These could be up here, these could be down here. You might have internal departments this way or internal departments that way. Again, every company is different, and so one of the things you should think about in ISO 27001 is that you're not the same as another company. Every company operates differently, and every company has internal, external providers that are different, and it just depends on, again, on the size of your company or how you're structured. Okay, so some typical external providers might be legal. You might rent your office facilities, so physical and environmental security, and you may use cloud services instead of an internal data center like Amazon Web Services or something like that. The dependencies here, we're going to list the dependencies as network security, access control. If you have external, if you're renting a office space from somebody, you might have physical security or access control that's outsourced to the company you're renting it from. And then cloud services, of course, you're relying on Amazon for data storage, data security, business continuity, and you may be leveraging their ISO 27001 certificate or their FISMA FedRAMP certificate as part of your security. Okay, so these are all the things we're going to consider here when we look at scope. Okay, by the way, ISO 27001 requires mandatory compliance to legal and regulatory and contractual requirements within the scope. Now, when we say mandatory compliance, we need to be able to monitor and measure those legal, regulatory, contractual requirements within the scope. However, we do not, it's a common misconception that we need to have a attestation or audit to show that we comply with it. ISO 27001 only requires that we can monitor, that we can show that we can monitor and measure those things, and so an actual compliance audit would work, but it's not required to show that you can monitor and measure it. Okay, so high tech, again, some other ones here, any contractual, client contractual agreements regarding information security within the scope. So the scope becomes here very important, what's in and what's out. Okay, Now we're ready to define the scope. We're going to take into consideration the interested parties. We're going to take into consideration interfaces and dependencies. We're going to take into consideration legal, regulatory, contractual requirements, and all those things when we decide the scope. This is that much more robust that the October 2013 version of the standard requires of us. Okay, now it doesn't require that you have it written down, as I mentioned, but my point, and this is one of the only things where I'm going to say go above and beyond the standard, write this down, show your executive management that you made the proper consideration by writing these things down so that we can see it, including the scope. The scope is required now to be document information, but my opinion is put the rest of this down in writing and show that you made the proper decision and considered everything. Okay? All right. Defining the scope now, we are ready to consider all the context of the organizational factors that we've listed to help us determine the proper scope. The scope definition is the most important step in the whole process. The scope will have a huge impact on the rest of the implementation project, including costs and effort. The scope should meet business requirements and add value to products and services. So choose carefully here. If you get the scope wrong, the whole ISMS is wrong and your clients may not accept it. Okay, so choose carefully. The scope is always a business decision. Some good questions to ask. Now this is I'm going to go through some things here that a lot of people might not consider. I have a legal background. I worked on international reinsurance arbitrations for a number of years, and so I'm going to, when we do scope for SecuraStar, what we want to do is some great questions to ask for our typical client is, what products and services do our clients expect us to protect their information in? Okay, this is a great first question when you're determining scope. Outside of those other factors is, what do our clients expect from us when they give us their information for products and services that we sell? Okay, another thing is we want these names of these products and services to be synonymous in the scope as they are in our contracts. Okay, and we're going to tie this back now to product liability and professional service liability. Okay, so what is the name that we call these products in our contracts? We may want to use those same names in our scope statement. Okay, what are the products and services, or I should say, what products and services would our clients litigate against us? In other words, sue us for if we were to have a breach of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Again, this is a key question to ask yourself, because this typically is what drives the scope, is what do we need to protect ourselves again, okay, protect ourselves against, and then what products and services are subject to constant information security questionnaires. Again, you can see here these are all typically related to products and services and not typically related to other parts of our organization that our clients don't care about. Okay, we want to get a value out of the ISO 27001 certification, and that value is to give reasonable assurance up front and defensibility in the back end should we be unfortunate to have a loss or a breach of confidentiality, integrity, or availability, and our clients sue us or litigate against us. Okay, so these are all related typically, not always, but typically. Okay, to answer these questions is often a good indicator of what our scope should include at a minimum. What information is captured in our products and services, and what are we reasonably should be protecting for our clients. Connecting the product and service legal liability to the scope. So there is a direct connection between product and service legal liability. Remember this from the executive management interested parties for information security. They have a requirement or a fiduciary duty to protect information within the products and services of the company. That's a legal liability, and this is why organizations buy product liability and professional liability, errors and omissions insurance. Okay, Thus, an ISMS scope that centers around protecting information in our products and services can provide value. When we talked about meeting business requirements and providing valued products and services, it can give reasonable assurance up front, right? We can use it in our marketing material. When companies ask us before they buy our products, they might want to know, how are you protecting my information? We can say the ISMS scope includes the products and or services that you're buying from us. It's been audited and certified to ISO 27001. That gives our clients reasonable assurance up front that we're protecting their information. And then that same scope, if we do it right, will give us defensibility on the back end should there be a breach of CIA and our clients litigate us, so that we can defend ourselves and show that we understood the information that we take in from our clients and our product services, and that we did our best job we can within our resources to protect it. Okay? And these are the two things that are really big, and you can see now how it's typically related to the legal liability of products and services, but not always. There are some companies that want to protect their intellectual property. There are some companies that just want to do something for a specific client or something like that, or for internally for their shareholders or something like that. So all of those are valid. It's just that this is what we typically do when we scope an organization. Okay, here's a diagram so you can kind of see what like in the visual. You'll see here that in the middle we typically scope products and services, but not always, and then this is related to our clients out here. And then touching these products and services, or the information in these products and services, can be all kinds of different internal service providers here, okay? The audit department, the quality department, IT, legal might be internal, software development, HR, and then you can see that external service providers can also be all over the board, and these can be flip-flopped around depending on the organization, but you can see here's all other service providers that might touch these products and services and have access to information. AWS Cloud has to do with availability. We have contractors, we have external software that we might use that touch these products and services that our information could be exposed in. Vendors, we have facilities here. These are office facilities. Utilities, how about the electricity company, okay, or the gas company or something like that that provides services to make sure our data center doesn't go down, right, that we have electricity, those types of things. Okay, so this is what it kind of looks like. There's all kind of, this is different for every company, and this kind of just shows you that there's a lot of things that could be touching our scope, and we need to protect these through different means. Okay. Now, this is going to be interesting for a lot of you as well. Again, this is just one way to meet the generic requirements for context of the organization and scope. SecuraStar likes to use a business process that collects, store, access, and distribute information. Why do we like to use a business process instead of just saying we're going to certify a whole company to ISO 27001, or we're going to certify just the IT department to ISO 27001? Because typically information has a life cycle within a product or a service. In other words, information comes in and it goes around in a box, arrow box, and it has a life cycle in there. And if we use a business process, that information life cycle is all inclusive, right? We can protect that information from the point it comes in to the point it goes around and touches anything in that product or service, and then it goes out. And that information life cycle is what we want to protect. That's much more inclusive than certifying one department or the whole company. Okay, so let me go through this with you here. Typically, our company is built around certain primary products and services. Why our company is in business, okay? And that's a business process within those products and services, or that information life cycle. But our company has all kinds of business processes that support those primary services that also collect and store information. Some of those might be in the scope because they're related to the scope, like help desk could be in this scope. However, it may not be in scope. Help desks may have no access to the client's information within the products and services. Sales and marketing may have no access to the products and services. Accounting collects and stores information, and there's multiple, this is just an idea for you, it's different in every company, but there's multiple business processes that collect and store information in every company. The question is, which ones are in scope and which ones are out of scope? Okay, now when we talk about service providers, just taking that brown diagram that we just were looking at, there's all kinds of internal and external service providers, or as the standard calls it, interfaces and dependencies. Okay, these internal departments provide a service to these different business processes, right? We have human resources hires people in the accounting department, right? And the accounting department collects and stores information so that you can bill your clients. Now, the question is that sensitive information? Do your clients care about it? And do we want to include that in the ISO 27001 certification? A lot of times, accounting doesn't have anything but public information that when we bill a client. So there may not be anything in here that our clients really care about us protecting. And so we might be able to keep this out of the scope. Okay, but you can see here, human resources provides all kinds of services to different departments within the scope, and they could even put in IT department up here and all kinds of things like that. Human resources hires people in IT. When they hire somebody in IT or they hire somebody in the mail room, do your clients care about that? That's the question, right? And so what we're saying here is when they hire somebody within the products and services that has direct access to the information of the products and services, that's something we know our clients care about. Okay? When software development creates a software for our accounting process, do our clients care about that? Or do they care when software development creates something that affects our products and services and the information in our products and services related to confidentiality, integrity, and availability? In this case, when they create something for the product and services that our clients are buying from us, obviously our clients would be concerned about that, but they might not be concerned when software development makes something for accounting or help desk or sales and marketing and so on and so forth. Here you can see this. So all we're saying here is that when these internal service providers touch the scope, this is when our clients care, when their information is has risk to confidentiality, integrity, and availability only within the scope. They really don't care a lot of times when IT gives accounting a password. They don't care about this. This has nothing to do with their information right here. And so we're just saying here now that this information is within the scope and auditable for the ISO 27001 certification, and this information is not auditable. It's not that it's not important. It's not that we don't apply the policies to everything. It's just that we don't need it to be audited to give value to our clients, to give value to our products and services. If we were to include when IT does something for accounting here, this does not give any value to our products and services. Our clients don't care about this. Okay, so that's what we're saying here. Because these are internal service providers, if we were to do scope this way, we may have an operational level agreement. Okay, it's called an OLA. We may do this with these internal departments. Okay, the bigger the company, the more important these become, because big companies like Microsoft and stuff, and they actually have IT services that they bill back to the IT department for all of their subsidiaries. So in this case, these OLAs become very important because we're going to tell IT, hey IT, this is what you do for this product and service, and when you touch this product and service, you must follow this requirements within this OLA. So we're in essence, we're treating IT as a external service provider, right? They're internal, but we're treating them like an external service provider, and we're clearly letting them know within an internal contract that this is what they're responsible for when they touch this ISO 27001 scope. Okay? Okay. We also have external service providers, and the same thing here. When they touch our scope right here, we're going to have a service level agreement with them or a third-party policy attached to the service level agreement, laying out specifically what they're required to do when they touch this important product and service scope so that we can prove to our customers that we're protecting their information. Okay, so that's what it looks like, service providers. Now let's look at a sample scope statement. This is a really generic one, but the scope of this organization's information security management system includes, and you can name the business process in here, or the product and services that collect, store, access, or distribute information, okay, within these primary products. Now you wouldn't, I'm just saying replace this blue statement here with whatever that the business process within these primary products and services. Again, what do we call these in contracts? Because there's no reason not to list the same terminology that we use in business contracts of the product and service that they're buying from us into this scope statement, because then they directly correspond to each other. The contract that you, the contract that you have with your clients and the product and services within scope. Now they are interactive, connected here to show that we're protecting the information and that scope has been audited and certified to ISO 27001. You also see here that it includes any underlying assets within this scope, this product or service, okay, and this is your asset inventory, and then only the offices that internal office says that are related to these products and services. Okay, so we're going to say city, state, countries, and then if you want to, you can also add this little scope statement here that says the scope does not include any other business processes, any other assets, or any other locations, and it just makes this very clean and clear what is in scope and what is out of scope, what can be audited or will be audited, and what is not audited. None of these are within the scope here. Okay, this is just a good diagram. This just came out of a training session that we did. We actually drew this up on the chalkboard, and then we just made it into a diagram so that people can kind of understand our reasoning. This is SecuraStar's philosophy. Typically, our reasoning of why we chose the scope that we chose and why it typically involves primary products and services as related to the contracts that we sign with our clients. Okay, just one way to meet the generic requirements in ISO 27001. It's not the right way for everybody. Okay, one other thing that we typically recommend is to describe or even create a diagram of the various business processes. So this would be a box, arrow, box kind of a diagram to show the information life cycle. When does the information come in from the client into that product and services? Then where does it go? Who can access it? How is it distributed? Okay, and we can actually create this diagram. Now, interesting enough, in our software, ISO Manager, we actually created a box, arrow, box diagram in there, and then we can attach assets to each box and threats and vulnerabilities to those assets in each box. That's a very deep document this information lifecycle within these different business process or sub-business processes. Then what we can do is perform risk assessment on the diagram, the life cycle of information within this business process, okay? So we can get pretty sophisticated if we do this the right way, or we can do it very simply by just doing risk assessment on assets within smaller clients, okay? So we can get very sophisticated for very large clients and very simplistic for smaller clients, okay? So here's an example of what we might just describe for anybody that looks at our scope. We might describe the business process description, and so here's a simple one here: the process of collecting, storing information, and distributing public property ownership records as related to real estate title insurance. So we're saying here what this business process is that collects and stores records. They're public property records that we're going to provide real estate title insurance companies when you buy a house or something like that. When we collect this information, it includes the query of public records related to the subject property and or persons. We're going to store this information in a specially designed commercial software product to conduct its work, and the software and its related matters reside in a cloud, secured cloud server, administered by a competent third party. And then how do we distribute the information? The distribution of the transfer of real estate information to title insurance companies. Okay, so we're basically saying here, this is an example that we're using of a company that provides public records, goes to the courthouses, gets public records, and then puts them into a software and sells them to title insurance companies. Okay, so anyways, this is just helps everybody understand what it is that we're trying to certify this business process, where the information is collected and stored, and then we might provide a diagram or an information life cycle of how it comes into that, how we first touch that information, who sees it, and how we distribute it, and all those types of things. Okay, additional steps here. Add all the once we decide what the scope is, so let's just say that we decided that the scope was a business process relating to a product and services. Once we do that now, we also need to define now, as we did in the very first part of the presentation, which of the legal regulatory requirements are in and which are out. Okay, legal regulatory or contractual requirements, sorry. And depending on the size of the organization, there may be several that are left out because you're a large organization. And then the smaller organizations, typically everything's built around one or two products and services, so all of the legal regulatory might be in. In any case, we have to define these because we need to show the auditor that we can monitor and measure compliance to those legal regulatory and contractual requirements. Okay, and this is what's called the risk of noncompliance. We must map all legal regulatory requirements to Annex A requirements. Okay, and also include these in the statement of applicability. So in your statement of applicability is as of which 114 Annex A controls apply to us, we need to say these specific 114 controls apply to us because of legal, regulatory, or contractual requirements. Okay. For ISO 27001 certification, you must show that you can monitor and measure these. We already talked about that. Here is where we are at now. We covered all of the context of the organization here. We have the scope and boundaries here now that we've defined it. Only the legal regulatory within the scope is monitor and measurable down here. We can now create our asset inventory of what's in and what's out for the risk assessment, and we can start moving down here the line and finishing up these other requirements, the risk treatment plan, the statement of applicability, so on and so forth here. You'll see here that if you get this scope wrong, the asset inventory is wrong, the risk assessment's wrong, the RTP is wrong, the statement of applicability is wrong, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the scope is one of the absolute most important things. Please consider the logic behind the products and services at a minimum, and also the logic around a business process or information life cycle instead of scoping a department, okay? Because the departments, like an IT department, is typically providing services throughout the organization, and your clients really don't care about that. So think hard about how you do this scope here. Again, it may have other government regulations and other things may affect the scope, and there's all kinds of things that can affect the scope, but that's what we typically do here, and I hope I've provided everybody a very good informative thought process here of what's important and some logic about why you may want to focus on your products and services as they relate to your reasonable assurance and for value to your products and services up front, and defensibility in the back end to show that you did the best job you could to build an ISMS around the information that you have access to within your products and services. Okay, here are, I know that maybe I'll hand this back to PECB here. I think they wanted to talk about some of the typical ISO 27001 training courses.
Well, thank you, Mr. David, for delivering this informative presentation. Now we want to inform you that PECB provides training and certification services for ISO 27001, Introduction, Foundation, Lead Implementer, and Lead Auditor. The training is designed to provide you the required knowledge to carry out audits of information security management systems against ISO 27001 and be able to run the processes involved in implementing the ISMS. A PCB certificate will exemplify your dedication in implementing and managing these processes and framework. And most importantly, you will be recognized worldwide. For further information, please follow the link of pcb.com. Now we will proceed to the question and answer session. Mr. David, the first question is if customer clients are interested...
Sure,
Excuse me?
Excuse me, may I just interject here? I would also just like to interject here on the courses, since SecuraStar and now iCertWorks teaches these classes. I do want to let everybody know that the ISO 27001 Introduction and Foundation are included in the Lead Auditor and Lead Implementer classes if you take these longer courses. We also teach ISO 27005 Risk Manager and ISO 27002 Control Manager. If you want to know which courses would be the most recommended, I would say the Lead Auditor and Lead Implementer, depending on what your philosophy is. But if you want to be very rounded as a consultant, then you want to take Lead Auditor, Lead Implementer. I would say ISO 27005 Risk Manager and ISO 27002 Control Manager. Those aren't listed here. But anyways, I just wanted to let everybody know that those are also important courses.
Okay, so we are moving to the first question. The first question is, if customer clients are interested parties, must we state each customer client by name?
No. We don't typically list interested parties as individual clients. However, I would say that we would say typically clients and say what are the typical requirements of clients. I didn't have that section listed as interested parties, but I just gave you one example, which is executive management. Obviously, we don't want to give away everything that we do, but we typically list clients' requirements, and some of those are going to be protection of their information in the products and services they buy from you. However, you may have one client that's very large of yours that presents a lot of revenue, and you may want to list that particular client as to their requirements. For instance, if your main client, if all you do is provide, let's say, special effects to the motion picture industry and to just one or two big studios, you can list those two studios because it's very relevant to your interested parties. But a lot of people are providing products and services, you know, to multiple clients, and so it wouldn't make any sense to list every client. Okay.
Okay, thank you for your answer. The second question is, isn't it that if you put out of scope systems that are connected to the same network, then the one in scope, you actually put at risk the systems in scope, since such example, cyber criminals will move laterally from the weakest system out of scope to the one in scope?
I think it's a great question, but I think that one thing that let me back up here so we can look at that slide. We're talking about this right here. When we do risk assessment, however, we are typically do risk assessment on asset categories, right, such as hardware, servers, and so on and so forth. So when we create a policy like a network security policy, we are still applying the policy to everybody within the organization for IT. However, what we are only saying then within the scope is that only when IT touches this primary product scope is this records auditable. Okay, so I totally agree with that situation. We're not suggesting that there's more than one policy. There's one network security policy, and it applies to everything that IT does. However, we're just saying that the audit only includes when IT touches the scope. Okay, and you can see how important this would be the bigger the organization. If we have a huge IT department that provides services to many subsidiaries worldwide, different subsidiaries that have different products and services, this is how it would have to work, because we wouldn't have IT in for a whole company worldwide like Microsoft. We'd never get certified. It would take years to audit it all. Okay, so so I hope that makes sense to everybody. We'll have one network security policy. We typically do risk assessment on an asset category, okay, and then we choose controls that we apply to the whole organization. We're only suggesting here that the audit be limited to these products and services to give reasonable assurance to our clients. So the value of the certificate only is here. It's not for all these internal ones, but we are applying these controls across the board to all servers, to all laptops. Okay, I hope that makes sense.
Thank you once again, Mr. David, again for this great presentation, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. I would like to let you know that this webinar will be recorded and posted at your website and at our website and YouTube channel. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey about the presentation, and we would appreciate if you would complete it and provide us with your feedback. Also, if you are aware of an interesting topic that you would like to discuss and participants would benefit from, please feel free to write down your suggestion. Next Wednesday, we will present the topic in a Spanish language about integration between ISO 27001 and Business Continuity Certification ISO 22301. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.